The name Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi invokes the image of the best that the series has to offer. All of the experience gained from developing Tenkaichi 1 through to 3, as well as the Raging Blast titles, has all culminated to create the Ultimate Tenkaichi game. The word ultimate in the Oxford English Dictionary is defined as not this game. When playing through this game, the main reoccurring thought I kept having was, why is it like this? I just genuinely do not understand what the developers were going for. It's like they took Raging Blast, which admittedly does have its problems, but instead of fixing those problems, they made them way worse, and then slapped an ugly as sin retexture on all of the models and called it a day. I've had people in the comments say that Tenkaichi 2 is their favourite in the series, and some will say that Raging Blast 2 is the best. While I personally disagree, I get it. I get why people would feel this way. Tenkaichi 2 has an amazing story mode, Raging Blast 2 has really refined gameplay. I get it, I understand. But Ultimate Tenkaichi? There are people in this world that think Ultimate Tenkaichi is the best. Are you fucking kidding me? Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi was released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2011. It is the final entry in the Budokai Tenkaichi series, but not for long as Tenkaichi 4 has been announced, so even the other definition for the word ultimate doesn't even apply anymore. If I were to sum up Ultimate Tenkaichi's gameplay in a single word, it would be really boring and repetitive. It has a similar control scheme to Raging Blast, but all of the mechanics have been stripped down to the point where you feel like you have no control. It doesn't really matter what you do in a fight because they all end up the same way. Get close to your opponent, tap the rush attack 3 times, tap it again, and then tap it while holding a direction to continue the cutscene. Cutscene ends and then you start tapping again.
Tappa, tappa, tappa.
Okay, so there's a little bit more to the gameplay than that, but you could go through the entire game like that and be perfectly fine. The fights do take place within fully 3D environments, and while you can move around in all directions, it's actually quite restrictive, but in a really weird way. You have the option of switching between 2 states. There is melee range and blast range. What actions you can conduct will vary depending on which mode you're in. While in melee range, you can utilize physical attacks such as the rush attack, which is your fast attack, and the smash attack is your heavy attack. And that's about it. I'm not joking, that literally is it. You can't even mix the 2 attacks together. The days of stringing attacks together into extended combos and expanding them into signature moves are long gone. You can now either hit them hard or hit them fast. Aside from being terribly restricting, it also makes the controls feel exceedingly unresponsive. The pause when switching from using a light to heavy attack is too clunky, and it just feels like buttons don't do anything half the time. You can dodge oncoming attacks, but you don't need good timing or anything, as your character will just automatically dodge as long as you have the evade button held down. I've heard a few people compare the combat to a paper scissors rock system, but this is a generous comparison, as most of the combat comes down to a simple coin flip. When you land 3 rush attacks in a row, the game will slow down. This is known as an attack clash. At this time you can choose between a rush attack and a smash attack. However, if your opponent predicts which attack you will use next, it will be negated. Both fighters will return to the melee range state, so there is a 50-50 chance that your attack will fail, not because you made a mistake with the button sequence or timing. No, it fails because your opponent correctly guessed. It is infuriating, and only serves to drag out fights even longer. Sometimes you will go through multiple clashes only for nothing to happen. Remember how everyone loved Dragon Rush in Budokai 3? Well, of course you don't remember that because it didn't happen. No one liked Dragon Rush, it was the worst part about that game. Despite this, the developers decided it was a good idea to base an entire fighting system around this concept. The only way to avoid the coin flip is to attack from behind or when in strike booster mode. This mode will also bypass the coin flip and extend out the attack clash. It can only be used when your ki is fully charged. It will also reduce your maximum ki once it runs out. If you successfully initiate an attack clash, you can continue it by pressing the rush or smash button while holding a direction. That is at least what the game teaches you. However, I discovered that you don't need to hold a direction because it would still continue if you just hit the button. Although using different directional inputs seems to change the animation that plays, so if you want to break up the monotony, I'd recommend mixing it up a little. You can charge a smash attack to knock your opponent back. From here you can follow up with a pursuit attack, which is pretty much exactly the same, but it will build up your spirit gauge. If you're on the receiving end of one of these clashes, you can try and recover by mashing the face buttons as much as possible. How much do you need to mash? Well, buggered if I know, because it hardly ever seems to do anything. I'm guessing a lot, but the game never explicitly tells you, just until it deems it enough, I guess. You will be given a chance to counter attack if you press the button at the correct time. If you haven't already guessed, this game includes a lot of quick time events.
Which was the style at the time?
Now, I don't have a hate boner like some people do for QTEs, and I think they can work well, especially if the game is built around them, like this game sort of is. Having said that though, I despise them in this game. They are annoying and make the game way more boring than it needs to be. Blast range is where you can perform key attacks and also dash around your opponent. There are two types of key attacks, rush key attacks and heavy key attacks. Rush key attacks feel largely ineffective because they deal little damage and are easily avoided. The camera is so far away from your opponent that you can't even tell if you're hitting them or not. The heavy key attack is more useful because it helps you build up spirit. Spirit is a separate resource from Ki, and it does a lot of things that Ki used to allow you to do, such as perform super attacks. I think they decided to split up the gauge to prevent players from spamming supers and ultimate attacks, as they were quite spammable in Raging Blast 1 and 2. However, I believe that they went too far, considering in most fights, neither side will end up using any supers, and ultimates are even more rare. You have to go into a fight aiming to perform an ultimate, as if you fight merely just to win, the battle will most likely be over before you even come remotely close to getting one off. That was a weird line. I didn't realise it until I said it out loud. Unlike the key gauge, which can be charged by simply holding down the D-pad, spirit can only be built up by landing heavy hits in pursuits. There are arrows on the gauge that indicates how much spirit you need to use the supers you have equipped. Ultimate attacks are only available when there is enough spirit in the gauge and the spirit high mode is active. Spirit high mode is activated when either you or your opponent has low health. It makes no difference which. So it works as both a combat mechanic as well as a lose or hope mechanic. But as I already stated, ultimates hardly ever occur, so it doesn't really matter if it's balanced or not. The individual on the receiving end has the option of guarding, evading or intercepting. Which actions you can take depends on how much ki you have. Guarding uses the least amount of ki and just reduces the amount of damage taken by the attack. Evade costs a little more ki and entirely avoids the attack, but in order to be successful you must correctly time a button prompt. Intercept demands the most ki and will result in a beam struggle. To win the struggle you must first win the war of button tapping.
Tappa, tappa, tappa.
It's nice that you have a chance to fight back, but for the amount of effort it takes to even perform supers, it's kind of annoying that it can be so easily negated. It almost doesn't seem worth it. Some supers can only be done at blast range, while others can only be performed at melee range. If you try to use the super while in the wrong range, the game will automatically relocate you into the correct range. A cutscene will play and you must press left or right. If you press the wrong direction, you will incur extra damage. You see, in this game you can't just seamlessly go from one range to another. To ensure that you know where you are, the game must play a cutscene and display a prominent text prompt. I mean, in previous Tenkaichi games players were trusted to handle things themselves, but we can't give people too much control since they might end up having fun. And we can't have that. Oh, and you can also taunt at this game.
Who do you think you are, you snot-faced little punk? Let me make this clear for you, okay? You are nothing! If you were in my toilet bowl, I wouldn't bother flushing it. My bath mat means more to me than you.
But from what I can tell, it doesn't do anything. But the game does go out of its way to explain that you can do it, but not what to do it for. There are 41 characters, which is nowhere near the amount seen in Tenkaichi 3. It's not like more characters will make much of a difference anyway, since everyone plays the same. The Tenkaichi fighting system has been so watered down that it is an absolute slog to play through. The QTEs are obnoxious and most actions are based on a coin flip. You have to watch your character play out the exact same attack animations over and over again. Everyone fights the exact same way apart from their supers and ultimates, but you hardly get to use them anyway, so you probably won't even notice the difference. The little control you have is clunky as hell, and half of the mechanics you don't end up using because they don't have enough impact on fights. Most fights take less than a minute, but even that feels like an eternity. It's just so boring to play. If you find value in the many hours of this channel's content, then become a channel member today, or consider giving a small tip through the Super Thanks feature. This game is ugly. I hate the way it looks. I hate the way I look. Spike's 7th gen titles have just gotten worse and worse looking. They went from Raging Blast, which I consider one of the best looking Dragon Ball games, to this game, which is definitely one of the worst. The colours are so muted. This was a reoccurring theme with the 7th gen. Let's strip away the colour of everything because that makes it more realistic. Because real life is absent of colour, apparently. I hate the way the characters are textured. It looks like they've been dropped in mud and then someone tried to wipe the mud off, but they didn't have any water, so they licked a napkin and tried to wipe it off that way, but instead of it being wiped clean, there is a thin layer of dirt over everything.
You phrased that really weird, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
The opening lulls you into a false sense of security. It's a beautiful 2D animation with Shala Hedshala playing in the background. After it has finished playing, it will lead you to a quite nice looking title screen, but once you press start, you are met with an ugly ass main menu. It's so dark and everything is so small. You can zoom in on the characters, but even the max zoom is tiny. The stages are probably the best looking things in the game because they actually fit the more realistic art style. You don't really get to explore the stages at all anyway because of the way the fights play out. Ultimate Tenkaichi's core gameplay system relies a lot on in-game cutscenes. They are constantly being triggered pretty much whenever a player does anything. I'm not exaggerating, they are that frequent. While the animations during these are pretty decent looking, you will be seeing the same ones over and 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 over again. There is a very serious lack of variety. Fighters do have slightly different looking fighting styles, but again, you will only see a very slight difference in the animations. The continuity between attacks is all over the place. Characters will be constantly teleporting around. 1 second they're attacking on the ground, and then they're in the air, and then on the ground again. It's kind of lucky that the game is quite restrictive with your movement options, because it would get very disorientating very quickly. Some of the larger key attacks, as well as the auras, are quite nice, but not the best the series has seen. The colours are just too muted and kind of meh. Because of the colour palette, Super Saiyans in this game all look like legendary Super Saiyans, with the unripe banana colour rather than a blonde or golden yellow. One thing the game does well, kind of well, is that the characters do actually emote when attacking. There are fierce looks on their face when launching powerful ki blasts and a flurry of punches, but the lip syncing is awful. Characters will become battle damaged when hit with big attacks, which is a really nice detail. Another really cool inclusion is recreation of scenes from the anime. The 2D animations are great and easily the best part of the game. At least for me anyway, these were my favourite parts of the game. Kinda sad, the non-gameplay part was my favourite part of the game. Unfortunately they don't match with the pseudo-realistic art style of the rest of the game. And yes, I am nitpicking, because this game is annoying me. It's annoying because the game does some really cool stuff, but the overall package just sucks. The game's story mode simply follows the story of the Dragon Ball Z anime, with the addition of a few significant battles from the various DBZ movies and even the Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta vs Omega Shenron encounter in GT. Oh, that was a long sentence. Unlike in most DBZ games, it doesn't start with a fight against Raditz. It instead begins with Bardock's final stand against Frieza. The first fight is impossible to win, since the game will automatically play a cutscene showing the destruction of Bardock and Planet Vegeta. The story mode features a map that you will be able to fly around, very similar to the one seen in Budokai 3 and in Tenkaichi 2. From here you can find collectibles, battle and optional fights, and of course access the story fights. While the flying isn't as smooth as in those other games, I do appreciate getting to explore the map, even if there isn't much to it. The main story fights will have huge auras emanating from it, and there is also a mini map in the corner to help you navigate. There will be sequences depicting the characters playing out significant moments from the source material before, during, and after critical fights. It is quite well done, although there are large chunks of the story missing, so it's not the easiest to follow if you don't know it already. It's a decent story mode for what it is, but the gameplay is so tedious that I didn't enjoy it at all, aside from the 2D cutscenes, which are fantastic. Now I'm skimming over the story mode a lot. That's because I'd like to discuss the game's new hero mode. It follows the same structure as the story mode, but includes a few new mechanics. Hero mode allows you to create your own character and play through an entirely new story. However, customization is extremely limited, particularly in the start. You only have 3 different hair and body options. To be honest, it feels rather half-assed. You can't even choose whether you want to play as a male or female. The story does refer to the character as being a guy, but they could have easily changed up some of the dialogue to be gender neutral. The only thing you have a lot of say over are the colours of your character. What your character will be good at will be determined by the 3 different body types. The standard type, and yes, that is what it's called, has a good balance of attack and defense. This type can learn many types of moves and super attacks through training and is the most customizable of the 3 types. Light types excel with blast range attacks and defense. Though small, this type is the most talented of the 3 types in the use of ki. Heavy type specializes in melee range attacks and defenses. This physically talented type has the strongest melee attacks of the 3 types. I just went with the standard type, and I'm not really sure how much of a difference the types actually impact fights. But given how the gameplay in Ultimate Tenkaichi works, I doubt it matters that much what type you choose. Just like in the story mode, there is an overworld map you can freely fly around. Also, just like in the story mode, there are main story fights and optional fights, but the difference is that there's a bit more of an incentive to do the optional fights. In hero mode, your character will gain experience and level up a variety of stats after each fight. There are a lot of extra fights, so there are plenty of opportunities to power up your hero. Although it can be a bit of a grind as some fights don't offer much experience. For example, you can enter into a martial arts tournament and win it and get bugger all experience. And the tournaments don't even have ring outs. The fights are just the same as all the others. Given the size of the arena though, it's no surprise that no one can get a ring out. You can strengthen your hero in other ways besides gaining experience. You can learn new abilities and equip super attacks. These can be obtained through training. As you progress through hero mode, you will meet new masters with whom you can spar in training mode. The more you spar with them, the more skills you will learn. The concept behind this approach is really appealing to me, since you're actually learning new attacks from the masters you've been sparring with. When you complete the training with a master, you unlock their fighting style, which doesn't really change how you fight mechanically, but does change your character's fighting animations. An excellent system trapped in a terrible game. You can utilize a scouter to find hidden items on the map while flying around. These items can be used to alter your hero's appearance, which is great because the customization that you start with is so limited that I was scared that this would be the end of it. You can go to the capsule house in the menu to rewatch cutscenes, read the character encyclopedia, modify your character's appearance, and watch replays. I'm not sure what kind of masochists want to rewatch fights though. This game is already so repetitive. It is also from here where you can see the Dragon Balls you've collected so far. Finding the Dragon Balls is actually the main goal in the hero mode. Yeah, I know, strange, a Dragon Ball game that actually cares about the Dragon Balls. I care about balls. The plot takes place several years after Dragon Ball GT, however it is unclear how long after. It is mentioned that both Goku and Gohan are no longer alive, implying that it has been quite a long time, but then you can train with both Goku and Gohan, but I think I'm just reading too much into it. The hero character is travelling the world training when he comes into possession of a Dragon Ball after defeating Captain Ginyu. Later he encounters androids 17 and 18 who remain evil in this timeline. I don't know what timeline this is. I don't know. Evil timeline. That's what it is. This fight is a team battle. Some confrontations in this game will allow you to switch between various characters. Each have their own separate health pool that is divided up evenly amongst the team. After defeating androids 17 and 18, the hero gains 2 additional Dragon Balls as well as the Dragon Radar. At this moment, the planet is in disarray. All of the cities have been destroyed and are constantly under attack. The hero learns about Piccolo, the reincarnation of King Piccolo, and tries to figure out if he is responsible for the current events on Earth. While fighting Piccolo, the hero transforms into a Super Saiyan. The same palette system that was used in the Raging Blast games is used for transforming, fusions, and switching. Most characters that can transform will have multiple to pick from, and you do not need to go chronologically through the forms. Ultimate Tenkaichi does go all the way up to Super Saiyan 4. However, no matter how much training the hero receives, he can only transform into a Super Saiyan. Piccolo informs him that a year ago someone assembled the 7 Dragon Balls and wished Ultimate Shenron to make Earth a living hell. Piccolo was attacked and injured by a great ape as he prepared to confront this individual. It is actually Baby in his golden ape form that attacked Piccolo, even though Baby should be dead. Who cares? Aside from normal fights, there are also fights against giant characters. These play out quite a bit differently than the usual fights, which I'd say is a godsend for such a repetitive game, but even these fights end up being monotonous. The word of the day, monotonous. For whatever reason, when fighting a giant, characters forget how to fly, so you're just stuck on the ground shooting them with weak ass ki blasts. Because your character cannot walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, you must be careful to not be firing ki blasts when the giant attacks. I'm not sure what's up with the controls during these fights, but they are as rigid as hell. There is a significant lag between your character firing a ki blast and then evading. Even though there is a huge wind up animation for the enemy's attacks, sometimes the game just won't let your character move. It's quite aggravating. After reducing the enemy's health to a certain amount, it moves to the QTE section, which is about as entertaining as any QTE boss, which is not at all. These portions can be cheated by pausing and checking the buttons you need to press. I only had to do this because the buttons in these fights were so unresponsive. I'm not sure why the input lag is so awful. It's not this bad during normal fights. If you couldn't already tell, I did not like these fights, like at all. Omega Shenron, it turns out, was the mastermind behind everything. So the hero goes to confront him but loses, and all of the Dragon Balls collected thus far are scattered once more. They aren't even attempting to conceal the fact that they are padding this out. So the hero must fight some more to reclaim the Dragon Balls, and then face Omega Shenron again to reclaim the final Dragon Ball. It's great to see that the hero mode is sticking to the theme of being repetitive and boring, so at least it's been consistent. The final fight would have been pretty awesome, as the hero has to fight Ultimate Shenron, but it consists of a whole bunch of annoying quick time events. Once Shenron is defeated, the hero's wish for all those killed during the chaos is granted. The end. Hero mode has some excellent ideas, such as being able to train under masters to learn their skills and customizing your own character's moves and stats. However, they did not go far enough with it. There needs to be more options at the beginning, as by the time you can really customize to your liking, the game is over. The gameplay just drags everything down. Unfortunately, the hero mode is an awesome concept trapped in a terrible game. Overall, I'd have to give Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi a rating of B, and not a B for bad, because it is something far worse than being bad. No, Ultimate Tenkaichi gets a B for boring.